Hello, good morning, and welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. I'm your host, Samson Lardy Anyenini. The World Press Freedom Rankings. Ghana scores the most embarrassing ranking that's got everybody talking. The report says, quote, government has shown itself intolerant of criticisms. This morning, we have an assembly of journalists, practitioners in active practice to tell us their reality. Is this the case? Can they affirm that to put Ghana as dropping 30 places in the latest index is fair? We'll also have their views on the failed e-levy injunction process, the challenges of the implementation, and the NDC's promise to repeal the law. We're right back to deal with the vexed matters. Welcome back. And on Samson's stake, cameras in court purging judicial misconduct. Ghana's judiciary was in the eye of the storm when Anas Aremeyaw announces secret cameras caught judges and court officers selling justice. The few corrupt, unworthy judges lost their jobs and today are unable to lift their heads in society. Tiger Eye certainly put its secret cameras in the courts because of years of accusations of judicial corruption. But the lead kind of corruption spoken about, bribery, is difficult to prove because the parties involved, giver and taker, are both guilty of the crime they commit in darkness, for which they risk up to 25 years in prison. The accusations, including of perverse and politically tainted judgments, never seem to abate. Some of them are just evil smear campaigns led by sore bad losers. The U.S. Department of State Country Report on Human Rights Practices 2021 has revived the debate that often ends in worsening the perception of corruption in the judiciary. But there is some effective remedy that the judiciary must embrace, at least for a category of cases, especially public interest ones. The Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Godfrey Dame-Yeboah, recently told a gathering of lawyers and law teachers and even judges that it was necessary to consider allowing television broadcast of such cases and not only presidential election petitions. The image of the very important institution continues to be battered by criticisms of the conduct and outcome of public interest and politically sensitive cases. It was refreshing to hear the prolific legal text author, trainer of judges and justice of the Court of Appeal, Sir Dennis Dominic J, argue that allowing the cameras in court ought to be a non-negotiable step now. This is a judge who was recently appointed to the advisory committee of the International Criminal Court to join 4 others from Italy, Serbia, Finland, and France to be the body responsible for nominating judges of the ICC. He has again been chosen among a few in the world, as fellow of the prestigious Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, University of London, UK, delivering a lecture on the RTI at the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences on Thursday. He stressed that this approach to what he calls open justice ensures fairness, accountability, and transparency. He wants Ghana to follow other countries like South Africa and get funding for live broadcast of all important constitutional, criminal, and human rights cases with unfettered access to journalists to cover court proceedings. I dare state that if this is not done soon enough, even the Supreme Court, however patently unjustified the accusations of its unanimous decisions, will suffer a credibility crisis, major, and make it unattractive to the best qualified legal brains. The Constitution in Article 125 affirms that justice emanates from the people and shall be administered in the name of the Republic by the judiciary, which shall be independent and subject only to this Constitution. Citizens may exercise popular participation, underline that, in the administration of justice through the institutions of public and customary tribunals and the jury and assessor systems. Let the people see the processes for themselves and hold judges and all more accountable. That is my take. A Newsfile is brought to you by the kindest sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strong as a group, close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. Waylead Properties, home is where one starts. Duraplus, where Duraplus goes, water flows. And Trazaco Fast Floors, stronger, faster, and affordable. I'll be right back to engage my guest, practicing journalists, some of whom have come face to face with circumstances that put them in the best position to tell us whether or not this embarrassing, most embarrassing World Press Freedom Report is for Ghana. Is everything there truth? Is it really the case that this government has become intolerant of criticism, leading to this position? We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, it's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. And get ready for a very interesting, rendition of Newsfile this morning with journalists. And joining us this morning, Evans Mensah is head political desk, Joy News and Joy FM. Manasseh Azure Awine, one of the most decorated journalists in our time, editor-in-chief, the Fourth Estates. He's an investigative journalist. Nana Ya Mensah, she's supervising editor, Asase Radio. Ifia Pokua is broadcast journalist and programs director at the Despite Media Group. Sewa Ameher is broadcast journalist with GH1 Television, and Okateche Efrifa Mensah is media practitioner and a chief. We will also be joined by Athel Moni of the Ghana Journalists Association and Liz Hefron Asari, journalist and media consultants. Let me welcome my guests who are already with us to the show this morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us on Newsfile.
Thanks for having us.
Great. So, first, Let's start with you, Manasseh. The reactions have been quite disturbing, if you like. The reactions appear to even worsen our image abroad. If you read from the GJA, what the GJA had to say about how embarrassing and how they did not expect this kind of rating, even though they knew that the country will drop, they didn't expect that this is how bad we will get. And many comments that have come. Let's take a listen to just a few of the comments, and then later I'll share with you the reaction of governments.
Beginning when Media Foundation for West Africa was calling on government to deal with certain issues with regards to journalists, nothing was done. Unfortunately, the Ghana Journalists Association was also very silent. If you heard about any brutalities or any harassment of journalists, you didn't have the Ghana Journalists Association come out immediately either to condemn or to solidarize with its members. And so it's not surprising that we are falling, because
I think what is accounting for our significant drop is the political context. And that is what we really have to do a lot about. In terms of the other context, economic and so on, the impact is to a large extent on professionalism and sustainability. If you look at countries like Sierra Leone, that has become 41st from 75. And last year, we issued a report in which we were commending the government of Julius Maada for improving the press freedom environment significantly. And not surprisingly, they moved from 75th to 41st ahead of Ghana. Are we saying that the economic situation in Sierra Leone is better than it is in Ghana? My answer would be no. If you look at Burkina Faso, Burkina is now 41, Sierra Leone 46, I should say. Burkina is 41. The economic conditions in Burkina far better than it is in Ghana? I would say no. Niger is ahead of Ghana. Ivory Coast is ahead of Ghana. Cape Verde is ahead of Ghana. I don't think that these countries are ahead of us because their economic conditions are better than that of Ghana.
Dialogue. The MPP tradition fought consistently for the recognition of the core democratic rights to governance in terms of association and movement, and in addition to speech, with successive constitutions preceding the Fourth Republic accepting and implementing these rights. We, the MPP, repealed the criminal libel law and rationalized the role of the NCA as a regulator par excellence. The real challenge now is balance. Recent reports, both internal and external, hyperbolically declaiming the supposed loss of media freedom in Ghana, are painting and playing up a picture of systematic harassment against free speech. But is it truly the case? And does mainstream media and civil society experience that in their daily lives and activities? Moreover, is free speech limitless? And can it be mischievously used as an instrument to foster instability? These are key questions, objective answers to which can dampen the scurrilous damage to our hard-earned political stability and potential growth in the name of regime change. The MPP believes Ghana media is the freest ever, and that its contributions to media growth are unparalleled in the Fourth Republic. In sum, MPP decriminalized speech, supported infrastructure and training with the International Press Center and support funds, and improved spectrum allocation and regulatory oversight. Free speech will continue its healthy climb under successive MPP administrations. Secondly, under the heading, a broken social contract, John Mahama woefully fails at painting an abysmal picture of democracy since 2017, insinuating a breach of MPP promises. So again, media and civil society should please let's fact check.
The latest report speaks to, a reality for us as media practitioners. On the matter on safety, it's not lost on all of us the issues to do with journalists who have been arrested in the last 1 year. And also, even as far back as one of our own who was murdered in cold blood just in front of his house, Ahmed Hussein Swale. I had cause to write yesterday on Facebook, very, very simply, that the state of justice for Ahmed Hussein Swale reflects press freedom in Ghana. What I meant by that is, if for many, many years since his passing, we have still not been able to get justice, not for him being a member of our media fraternity, but for his family, for the wife, for the child, for the entire Swale family, as an indicator that, look, when a journalist is touched, when somebody is killed in cold blood, and the state has a responsibility to get to the bottom of it and find the perpetrator and have the person dealt with, it gives a strong signal for us as practicing journalists that when any of us is touched tomorrow, justice will be served.
Right. So I'd like us first, if it is possible, because we have been discussing the issue all week, to go to some of the reactions, particularly from state actors, including Yabuabenga Samoa. If we may also listen to Kojo Oppong Nkrumah, what he has to say, the information minister. Okay, he issued a statement. We'll share portions of you for you, and some of you have already read some of those statements already. Now, begin with you, Manasseh. If you could start by looking at what, for example, Yabuabenga Samoa suggests. You are the freest media in the world. You have nothing to worry about. The things you're talking about are not objectively analyzed. As far as he's concerned, this World Freedom Rankings, I mean, to be polite, is bogus.
Well, Samson, if you had asked me this question 6 or 7 years ago, I would have agreed with him. I attended conferences in the past, and when I spoke about the media freedom in Ghana, journalists from other countries often came to me and told me how lucky I was. Unfortunately, that is not the same. And I have been doing this work for at least 10 years. I started writing and critical pieces when President Kufuor was in power. I did a bit under President Mills, but most of my journalism has been under President Mahama and then President Kufuor. And the difference is clearer than day and night. I'm saying this because of two things. Not only have we seen increased attacks, but we are looking at the severity and also the actors involved. It was very common to threaten somebody and one would take it lightly. But if your colleague, investigative journalist, is put on television and threatened openly, and later that person is killed, you are going to treat threats seriously and differently. Also, we are beginning to see state actors that are getting involved. The national security. And we know the national security in Ghana is like an extension of the government or the governing party. So we saw what the national security did to the modern Ghana journalists. Till date, we have not been told the offense these journalists committed, apart from we knowing that they had published something unpalatable about the national security minister at the time. We know what happened to Caleb Kuda. We also know what the police started doing with the law of publishing false news, which President Kufuor in 2011 condemned the government when the police arrested somebody for publication of false news. The person accused Rawlings of burning his own house. The president now did not take it lightly. And what has happened in some of those instances are very close to the presidency. I mean, Mensa Thompson of his ASEPA accused or alleged that the president's family used the presidential jet to do shopping. The military denied, he apologized and retracted, but he was still arrested. We also know that Kwabena Bubiansa also accused the First Lady of something, and he was also arrested. So we are seeing something close to the presidency or the government. The third and final leg of it, which for me is very worrying, is the body language of the president. Last year, for instance, if you read the information minister's press statement, they mentioned other countries that also did poorly when compared to their previous ranking. And they mentioned the Netherlands. A journalist, an investigative journalist covering drug issues, was murdered in the Netherlands. The Prime Minister, the European Union, almost everybody who spoke said this was an attack not only on press freedom, but it was an attack on the democracy of their country. Now we have Ahmed Swaleh, who was murdered after he was openly threatened by a politician, a top politician of the governing party. And we had the president of this country go to the bar conference in Takoradi and said, in as much as the death was unfortunate, it was equally unfortunate for people to say that his killing was linked to press freedom. When that body language is...
Okay, so our line just got a bit disturbed to Manasseh Azure. And Manasseh, thank you. He's actually far away from town and has agreed to do this pause wherever he is to do this with us. Do we have Manasseh back? Yes, Manasseh, continue.
His followers, it doesn't portend well for press freedom. One of the regions, and when he was speaking...
Okay, so your line is beginning...
Hello, can you hear me, Samson?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. So what I'm saying is that when the president acts in this manner, the followers begin to think that it is okay for us to do what we have to do or we want to do to journalists. And I'm contrasting this body language with what I experienced under President Mahama. When I did the Ford expedition story, I have said how the government reached out to me to give me police protection, and I felt so safe at the time that I declined. But within that same period, I was about to launch a book, and someone told me, have you invited President Mahama? So I laughed and said, looking at these circumstances, why would I invite him? And the person said, John Mahama is tolerant to a fault. If you invite him, he would come. He couldn't come because that day, I know that was the day the Munche 3 were jailed and there was some crunch meeting at the presidency. But the president sent somebody to represent him at my book launch in that critical moment and was the one who even bought the highest when the auction was done. What this body language meant was that if there was someone out there who wanted to attack me, the person would think twice that the John Mahama I'm fighting for is the same John Mahama at Manasseh's book launch. So there's no need to what? Attack. And so when I talk about the body language, I do not think that the current president we have has treated these comments so seriously. These attacks, they always almost try to defend and try to justify and try to make it appear as though there was no problem and only some journalists and civil society groups were making noise. To the extent that people like Sam Jonah even joined. And I thought they would take it seriously, but each time they told us there was no cause for alarm. And so what we have seen in the ranking is just a confirmation of what we've been talking about all along.
Even before this was released, Elizabeth Ohene, a very well-known veteran, you call journalist, has been with the BBC, didn't take lightly to a BBC documentary that, criticized this country for cracking down, as it were, journalists or press freedom. And you took issue with her. Of course, now she's in government, but should that deprive her of stating her reality just like you have the opportunity to do?
Well, I think it would be unfortunate if I say Elizabeth Ohene should lose her voice because she's in government. She has her voice and she's free to discuss whatever she wants to discuss. I am also free to point out to her the loopholes in her discussion or her argument. When she pointed out to the BBC that the Media Foundation for West Africa is no longer in a position to present unbiased opinion on this government, she did not back it with any fact. But we know that if you go to ministerial vetting, every data that is quoted on press freedom is researched by the Media Foundation for West Africa. In the sub-region, West Africa, there is no more noticeable voice, credible voice than the Media Foundation for West Africa. For years now that we have had issues with the Ghana Journalists Association, but for the Media Foundation for West Africa, journalists wouldn't have had any voice to speak for them. So if you go to attack institutions without providing basis, then some of us are also willing to point the facts to you. He said the BBC should have spoken to entities like the National Media Commission. And what she failed to provide by way of context is that the National Media Commission is now headed by an appointee of the president, which a number of people have issues with. He also tried to make it look as if there are no issues and that the BBC shouldn't have spoken to people like Bobia Ansah because the kind of journalism Bobia Ansah is doing should have been taken into account. I have stated publicly that I have issues with some of the utterances of Bobia Ansah, but the context here is that what he did was not criminal. The First Lady could have sued him for defamation. And Samson, I take this so seriously because I have been sued 6 times for stories I have published. In each of the suits, those who sued me said what I published was false. All the 6 of them ran away from their cases. If the current style is to be applied, then it means that on 6 of the occasions, I would have been arrested. I would have been put in cells. I would have been charged. And if there was no case against me eventually, I would have still suffered some punishment. And at least on 6 occasions, I could have been arrested and put behind bars. And that alone is enough to humiliate a journalist. So what I am pointing out to Elizabeth Ohene is that it is true this journalist may have said something that is wrong, but the right thing, in my view, was that whoever felt defamed could have sued. If you begin to use the police, then it is going to be harassment.
All right. So in the last few weeks, from the BBC's report on press freedom in Ghana, very dim, outlook for Ghana, quite country image tarnishing for Ghana. We also had the U.S. State Department report on human rights also referred to issues and treatment of journalists or media. And that was also equally embarrassing. And then now we have the World Press Freedom rankings. In all these situations, speakers of government, appointees of the government and the party have, if you like, played what people would say the ostrich, as if, the things that are being spoken about are not real issues. What do you say to the response of the Information Ministry in the statement issued by Kojo Oppong-Nkrumah?
Samson, it is ironic that all of these are happening when we have a journalist as the information minister. Some of us have worked with him, and we believe that some of the things we are talking about were also of concern to him when he was with us. When I read the statement, I saw that they largely want to blame it on the methodology. But if you look at the countries that did well last year, the first country is still the first country this year. That's Norway, with the same methodology. And they try as much as possible to push much of the blame to one of the matters. That is economy. And if you look at what the Reporters Without Borders have even written under that in terms of Ghana, they also make mention of the fact that government does not distribute advertising revenue transparently if they want to advertise. And this is common knowledge that if NDC is in government, you find a number of state entities and state-owned institutions advertising in NDC tabloids. And if NPP is in government, you see that a lot. All of these account for even that economy or the economic aspect of it that they are blaming on and trying to make it appear as though the government has no hand in it. Again, if you look at some of the policies that the government through the NCA wants to implement, I know that Joy FM, Asempa FM, and a number of radio stations may have their frequencies cut by more than half, from 100-kilometer radios to about 45-kilometer radios. What this means is that if somebody was advertising on Joy and now knows that, well, Joy is not able to go as far as it should have gone, it is likely to affect the advertising revenue of Joy City and a few of the media houses that are doing critical journalism. When you do this, you are indirectly crippling the financial status of the media houses. And so the government cannot even be completely absolved of wrongdoing if we want to critically look at the economic aspect of the ranking.
Okay.
Having said,
I wanted to ask you this last one so that I'll move on to Evans Mensah. You spoke about the question of safety of journalists and the fact that you did the most daring, stories, exposés during Mohammed's era, and yet you felt secured, but this time you feel insecure. Without revealing much, what is the cause of that? Many will say that even in this regime, you have done some of the, if you like, very dangerous investigative pieces. People have lost their jobs. People are having to hide because they can't come into the public anymore. Because you have exposed their corrupt, conduct. So what is the basis of you feeling secured when you did that during Mohammed's era and don't feel secured now?
Samson, it is unfortunate I will not be able to reveal everything, but I can say that the very first time I took a death threat to the police was in 2017. And the CID boss at the time, Mame Yadodankwa, would attest to this. And also the head of cybercrime unit. The other time I took another serious death threat to the police was in 2020 and reported at the police CID headquarters. The very first time I had to leave this country out of serious security implications was in 2019. And the second time I had to leave was in 2020. Unfortunately, sometimes you are not able to come public with all the details. But I remember in 2020, the DW, that's Deutsche Welle, was having a debate with Otokono and then I think Richard Ahiaga of the MPP. And when it came to press freedom, the MPP rep on that debate said, well, the Manasseh you are mentioning is so safe, he's doing his work. I can tell you this afternoon there was a press conference in Accra, Manasseh came and covered. He's safe. When the interview ended, the woman doing that interview on the Facebook channel of DW called me and said, did you hear that? And I said, I did. And why did she ask? At the time they were saying I was safe, I was actually in Germany, in the same town the interviewer was. So these are some of the realities that some of us face. And I cannot say everything, but I've given context as to how the government at the time approached issues.
Okay.
They would deal with your issues and try to live your personality. And I would say that some of the most difficult years for me as a journalist have been the last 5 years. And
okay.
I don't think that what I have said and what has happened to others, if I see that a colleague journalist has been threatened, the next moment that journalist is killed, I'm not going to take threats as I used to have them.
Okay. I said that would be my last one, but in a minute, you know, it's a difficult interview to have with you on the subject because I'm your lawyer. So it's difficult to actually also ask questions that may reveal certain things. But you mentioned, for example, the Mahama Ford Gate, which the NDC believes contributed greatly to favor the NPP. The NPP used that weapon massively to favor them in their election victory and causing the NDC also to lose. You speak about the fact that when you did that particular story, right after the broadcast, that's, you know, day, you got a call from the communications minister then, Omane Boama, asking assurance if you were safe and if you were not, to ensure that there was security deployment to protect you, and you declined because you felt safe. But before you made the publication, you were put in a most uncomfortable situation, including comments that came from the same place that you said, you know, are tolerant and you feel safe even after the publication. Is that not so?
Yes, Samson. And those comments are very normal with the kind of work I do. I don't expect the NDC.
Manasseh, I'm not talking, I started with a caveat because we can't say things in public. I'm not talking about public comments that were not public, but known to you, made to you,
yes,
either directly or on phone.
Yes, those comments were not threatening comments. So, for instance, I've written about part of it in my book, The Fourth John, so I can speak about it. The president's friend, who happens to be a mutual friend, met me and said he had not been directed by the president to tell me this, but they know that I was coming out with an investigation, and that if that story broke at that time, they had no chance in the election. And their worry was that I was the one on the beat. If it were any other journalist, how much would they demand that they couldn't pay? But for me, they knew no amount of money would make me drop it. So if possible, I should hold on till after the election. When that failed, there was this suggestion that they could give me some information about Akufo-Addo, who was also going somewhere to take money for his campaign, so that if I published those two together, they would also have something to say about the NPP. And I said no, that wasn't going to work. The tribal card was tossed, it didn't work. And I eventually went ahead and did a story.
All right.
These sources were not antagonistic. And I can tell you that even under this government, there have been times very high-ranking people talk to me to see if I could do something about a story when the promo started. And so this is very this is very normal for somebody like me. But the difference is the kind of commentary, the kind of message, the kind of threats you receive.
Manasseh, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, please pardon me, because he's actually in transit. He's traveling and needed to stop and be able to speak to us. And then perhaps in the course, if he gets to a stable area, we can reconnect with him when you are all having the conversation. Let me come to you, Evans. Now, what's your reality when you read this report, and you have engaged many people in the course of the week on this very, very, battering, nation image battering report for us. I want your reality.
So the report, for me, I took it in two different dimensions. So there's a third dimension, which is the broader view, and then there's a more specific view to it, where you look at the specific indicators that were measured, and then there's a broader view. Now, to the question, if you look at the broader view, where you look purely at the rankings where we are, we're at 60, that definitely doesn't tell a good story. If you drill down to some of the specifics that the World Press Freedom Index has touched on, one of the things that speaks to my reality is the political context. And this is something that the Reporters Without Borders themselves had articulated in explaining some of the reasons why they ranked us at 60 in the world. They talk about the fact that to protect their jobs, and they're talking about journalists, their security, the journalist security in Ghana, they increasingly resort to self-censorship. And it is to that phrase, that self-censorship issue, that for me speaks to a current reality. Now, many people wouldn't know, but in many newsrooms, including our own, colleagues do stories that are very credible, and people say I'm diabolical. I am, Samson. You've produced me a top story. For us, if it has to be controversial, that's the thing that you do. You don't care whose ox is God. You go out there on top story every day, and you do your stuff. If it's the president, you say it as it is. You want to be as controversial and tell the story in a way that people pay attention to. But that's journalism for you. So far as you're factual, you are okay to do the story. But in newsrooms now, you're doing a story come and you're simply passionate about you're going to do a story. The comments that you hear colleagues pass, and sometimes it's done in jest, but if you drill down, it's actually coming from a place. They tell you, Charlie, they'll come for you, right? And in many newsrooms now, you see people say this on a daily basis, on a regular basis to you. We are self-censoring. And I've done this job for 18 years, so I know what I'm saying. We are self-censoring more now than we used to be. You are thinking a bit more. When you're writing a headline, you are thinking a bit more about the implication of this headline than you would do before. And for me, that is one of those silent areas we haven't talked about enough. I know Manasseh has talked a lot about the physical attributes of the fear of harm, and so I will not belabor that point. But for me, that point that the Reporters Without Borders touched on, it is so critical to the reality today. There must be a reason for this. And one of the reasons for this is, and I have disagreed with the president quite forcefully, when his public utterances, unfortunately, reinforces this view and leads journalists like myself and others to self-censor a bit more. Look, you might eventually overcome the self-censorship after you've looked at the headline in 1,000 ways, which you shouldn't really, because it's factual. That's, for me, that fundamentally is all you should look at. Is this factual? If it's factual, write it. But when you pause for a longer time, you consult colleagues, sometimes it has to go all the way up just to check whether what you're writing, the implications of it, there might be something wrong there. But back to the point. Sometimes the president's own utterances publicly lead to this, extreme self-censorship that we do. And I'll give you an example. Very recently last year, Joy News decided to do have a series of conversations about the free senior high school policy. And that's what journalists do. What we do is we need to hold government's feet to the fire. We need to hold government accountable to the people. In fact, it is a constitutional injunction in chapter 12 of the Constitution.
Yeah. We should be playing you that sound clip from the president, but make the point where he speaks about the free SHS and what he thinks it is the thing that you are doing at Multimedia.
Absolutely. And then the president gets an opportunity, and then the president is a well-known, renowned lawyer. He knows that we have a legal constitutional injunction to hold his government accountable to the people, right? If you've implemented a very fantastic policy as the free SHS, you're spending possibly, well, not even possibly, the facts from the budget shows it. One of the biggest line items in the budget in terms of government intervention policy is the free SHS. If you do that, you spend the taxpayers' resources to implement such a fantastic, wide-ranging, very important, and my brother benefits from this, and we applaud the government for this. If you do that, though, you will need the citizens to sort of evaluate what you're doing. And the journalists must do that, because every Ghanaian can do that, right? And so we must do that. We must give you the feedback. And we give microphones to people to do just that, a constitutional injunction. And then the president gets an opportunity to speak about this work that the journalist was doing. And this is what he says, quote, "A radio station is currently running a campaign against
Hold it, Evans. Let's hear the president's own voice on this subject.
Ghanaian media has, in fact, enriched the nation's governance by its curiosity, investigative skills, and persistence. Today, the Ghanaian citizen is able to give boldly and freely his or her feedback on policies and programs of government. Society groups are able to interrogate fearlessly government actions and positions, compare them to global best practices, and offer views and critiques aimed at complementing the efforts of government. And the political opposition is able to raise dissent openly, canvass for alternative viewpoints, and by so doing, offer our citizens alternatives to consider on all key issues of our national discourse. No wonder Ghana is, according to Reporters Without Borders, the #1 country in Africa in the Global Press Freedom Index. So what do I make of the current accusations that are being made that freedoms are under attack under the Kufuor government? I do not claim to have been a lone knight in shining armor, but it is fair to say we went through many battles together to get where we are today in the media sphere in our country. We did not wake up suddenly one morning to find ourselves with over 400 different radio stations and dozens of television channels instead of one radio station and one television station, both owned by the state and under the firm and unrelenting control of government.
Evans, my sincere apologies. Having a little difficulty with my production. We'll bring you that voice, but go ahead with your quotation.
The president says a radio station is currently running a campaign against free SHS. During the last election, I got the clear impression free SHS had been endorsed by all political parties, and all we need to do was to keep improving it. Would a spirited defense of the free SHS policy constitute an attack on press freedom? I wonder. Now, it is the first line for me that is a problem. Where the president characterizes a piece of journalistic work that in essence only gives the microphone to the people to give the government feedback on a very important national policy like the free SHS. To characterize that as running a campaign against the policy, it is unfortunate to say the least. But what it does to the journalist who's doing this work comes back to the self-censorship issue that the Reporters Without Borders highlights as part of the reason why we are scoring this low. A journalist hears that from the president. So that is how your president characterizes your work when you're not even being critical. You're simply opening the phone lines and asking people experiencing the free SHS in real time to give feedback to him and his policy implementers. And he says that is a campaign against it. That is unfortunate. And that feeds into the self-censorship issue. And for me, that has been one of the key things that we're experiencing in newsrooms now in terms of reality. There's a fear there that somebody, the president, may mischaracterize what you're doing as one, a campaign, as two, a politically motivated agenda against his government, and that often influences not what necessarily he does, but what others, as Kukubaku will always call them, the fringe elements, right, around his government and people who think they hold allegiance to him and are loyal to him, they then begin to take a cue from what the president had said, and then they then begin to do the attacks. And so you hear people like the Japan go on the radio and attack journalists because the signal from above is what they are doing could possibly be a campaign against us. Right. That for me is unfortunate. But having said that, that's a broader view. Right. And then if you drill down to the specifics, though, you begin to look at the key things that they mentioned. And just a minute on that. We did not do poorly in all the aspects of the things that they measured. That's right. It has to be emphasized.
That's right.
We did very well in areas such as legislative indicator, 81%. We did very well in social indicator. In fact, we didn't even do as poorly as the specifics suggest in the examples Manasseh and I had given when it comes to the political indicator, because there's 66% there. The poorest performance, and it's true. I mean, you can look at Kojo Oponkuma's statement and say, Manasseh will say, well, we want to draw attention to the economic indicator. But the fact is, the Reporters Without Borders indicators and the expert panel measures this and say that is the poorest in 47%. So it is important that we look at that specific. And they give a caution. And when I was doing PMS, at that very point, doing PMS was this week, and I asked the research decks to help me drill this down. They came back to me with a caution because we had done a trend analysis of the index, and I was going on air to make the point that this is the index, this is the trend, and it came back to me and alerted me that we should look at a document that had been published as part of this. And I see later that it was reflected in the Kojo Oponkuma's statement, but it is important nonetheless if you're doing research and putting this in context. They say that in light of this new methodology, care should be taken when comparing the 2022 rankings and scores with those of 2021. For me, that is important to observe. But if you drill down, we come back to that later, some of the specific things that it measures, then we can begin to address which particular areas should we be addressing in terms of the interventions going forward to improve this the next round.
So we'll deal with the solutions. We are talking your reality and solutions. And thank you very much. I know that you are also hard pressed for time, but stay with us a little while longer. Let me go to Sawa. Sawa, me here. Sawa, are you with us? Hello, Sawa. Hello, Sawa, please unmute. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Right. So you have been in the mainline broadcast business for how long now?
So I have been doing this a little over 4 years. I haven't been in it as long as Evans and Manasseh, but it's just a little over 4 years.
So using your experience, gauging your experience against the reports, what do you say?
Well, so I would just say that, this report is just a reflection of the reality in the media practice. I haven't been around for long. I haven't experienced, I wasn't in active journalism when other governments were in power, but the figures are there for all of us to see, right? And even in the 4 or 5 years that I have been around, I have seen, I have experienced quite a number of things. There is nothing in that report that was not known to all of us since we all live here. We have heard and we have seen several instances of abuse against journalists. There have been many reports by journalists who say for the fear of their well-being, they don't do ABC when they criticize this government, I have had colleagues who have suffered one form of abuse or the other, or threats. So I had a colleague in the Upper West region, Edward Adeti, who had to leave the region twice because he had done a story which got a Minister of State to resign in 2019. His house was attacked. It was ransacked. He was literally abused, and he had to come to Accra for almost 2 months. When that happened, I recall that the Ghana Journalists Association issued a statement, as they always do, condemned the attack, and said that they were going to ensure that Edward was safe. And that was it. My colleague, Redwan Karimdini Osman, was also abused, not by a politician or a state actor. And I recall very well. So Athel Money went to visit Redwan at the hospital, took a picture with him and posted it, issued a statement, condemned the attack, and that was it. Till date, no one followed to ensure that, these journalists got some justice. Nothing was done. It just stops. The bus just stops for the GJA with issuing statements, and that's it. And I have a problem with that. If the institution or the association that is supposed to look out for the safety of journalists are always seen to be just issuing statements and then it ends there, who then is going to stand up for us? I don't know. It's good that Athel is here to tell us what the GJA has done, for instance, in pushing to know what happened with Ahmed Swale's killing, because as we sit here, we know that no one has been punished for that. We heard Manasseh speak. We know that Manasseh had to flee the country, on that documentary that he did. I have had instances where Manasseh, for instance, will call me. I haven't been threatened, but I have been abused severally on social media for questioning certain government policies, for saying one thing or the other about the government. And I have spoken with people who are in government, and they say that, look, when you people tweet or write certain things on social media, we send our arsenals after you. So we say that, look, Sewa just tweeted something, go and attack her. Go and read it and do whatever you want to do to her. I have been a victim of that several times on several occasions. And there are people on this platform. There's Ifia Pokia, there's Evans Mensah, there's Manasseh, who have called to find out if I'm okay. And there are people, there are journalists who say that I won't tweet, I won't do this because I cannot stand the criticism and the insults that comes with some of these posts. So I have suffered that. Now, while I appreciate, Samson, the right of governments to rebuttal, I believe that setting up social media trolls to personally attack journalists for being critical is not the way to go. So there was a time where there was a member of parliament who, on his social media page, was making a lot of noise about a bridge that he had constructed for his constituency. I saw it, and I said, this is something that these people deserve. It's not something that you need to rub it in our face like you've done something that hasn't been done before. That member of parliament's social media account personally attacked me, insulted me, and like I said, I appreciate the right of governments to rebuttal. We've scrutinized.
So what has been said over time is that you journalists have opinions on almost everything, and you criticize as harshly as and violently as you can, but you cannot stand the same measure of criticism, and that should not be said to be stifling press freedom. What do you say to that?
Well, Samson, I don't believe that anyone on this platform right now, Evans, Pia Pokia, Nanaya Mensah, and all that, will have a problem if we say something and you believe that what we have said is untrue. Only come back with facts to rebut what we said. For instance, I mean, I listen to Evans every time. I listen to Ipiapokia. When they are making statements, they don't just come and sit on radio and just speak. They come with facts. So government says that it has constructed so and so kilometer of roads, and then they come with facts and say that is not the case. From the research that we have done, this is what we know. So it is only fair that when you want to make a rebuttal, you come with facts to rebut what we have said. Not with insults, not by sending your arsenals to insult us on things that have got nothing to what is being discussed. And that is where we have a problem with. When you come with facts, what can we do? I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's for the country, right? So I don't have a problem if state actors or politicians or even their followers who they send to attack us come with facts and say this is what we know and what you're saying is a lie.
We know that government has been accused of recruiting an army of people to do social media sort of, if you like, attack or PR for it. But this claim has not been, as it were, confirmed by government that in fact it has recruited such, people in their hundreds. We're told that the NDC had done a bit of that earlier, but the NPP appears to have superseded and done quite a better job at employing in 400 and something of them or so who do this job. So could it not be the case that the people you say attack you are not actually government people?
Samson, I was saying earlier that I spoke with someone who works at the presidency, and he told me, and some other colleague of mine, in confidence, that we have people, and obviously we don't expect them to come out and say that, yes, we have put together these people. We don't expect them to, but they have told us that they have people, and we know some of the people. And they also tell us that they have been recruited by some members in government to do some of these things for them. So they do it. I don't expect anyone to come out and accept or say that, yes, we send these people or we know them. But they do have people. They have them, and they send them after us. We know them. We know some of them. We have seen some of them and their tweets and the kind of positions that they hold in government. So yes, we know them. We don't even need them to admit to us that they send them, but we know them.
So this, in fact, is your reality when you gauge the report. Have you been to the place where you personally have to also self-censor because you are scared, you are uncertain of the reaction of your publication, however factual it is?
Oh yes, I've had a couple of those instances, quite many of them actually. You have to be careful. You don't want certain attacks, and at some points you just say that let me just slow down a bit or tone down a bit, because you ask yourself, all these attacks that come, are they really worth it? Are they really worth it? So I've had several instances where I've said to myself that, Stewa, look, you need to slow down. Just calm down. And I'm sure that every single member of, every other person I know, journalists, especially in my organization, is doing the same thing. Because as for self-censorship, we are all doing it. And there's also another part of the report that I want to look at, which is the economic aspect. And Manasseh was saying earlier that as there are certain media houses that don't get certain jobs because we all know why, and in the run-up to the 2020 election.
When you say jobs, you mean
advertisements. Okay. Advertisements. In the run-up to the 2020 elections, for instance, my media house, GH1 TV, didn't get certain advertisements from the government because a member of the party told me, a leading member of the NPP told me that when we come and play our documentaries on GH1 TV, right after, you people air stories on your news about how bad some situation somewhere is, and, you know, cancelling every good thing that we have said in that documentary, which we have paid money for. So what's the point? So they won't bring the documentary to the station. And we have suffered it quite a number of times. They hold certain programs and you don't see us on there. And obviously, and they have told me, I mean, like I said, leading members of the party have said it to me that these are the reasons why we don't bring some of the documentaries to your station, because right after, yes, you take it and air it, but right after you do something to counter what we played. And it's as though we are not supposed to be doing our jobs, and we are supposed to be doing the bidding of one party or the other. And it's just, let me just say that it is not for, I'm not saying this just for the NPP. I mean, I get members of the NDC equally attack me in the same measure. You know, so it doesn't, it's not, I'm not saying that I get attacked just from the ruling government, but it's both ways. Just say something that doesn't sit well with them, and that's all.
All right.
That's the only thing you need to trigger.
Okay, so I will take a quick break. When we return, we will get to Efia Pokwa and also Nanaya, and seek to establish if this in fact is their reality. And the questioning, when Evans speaks about people afraid of attacks, and the word is used, they will come after you, they will come for you. Who do you mean when you say they will come for you or come after you? Beyond social media bullying, is there anything beyond that? We'll be right back. This is Newsfile.
Addressing a particular line of the current argument being made about the threat to rights and freedoms. I believe this has led to a new definition of a culture of silence. It goes along the line. That when people in government and all government policies are criticized, and there is a defense of the people of policies, it is intimidatory and leads to a culture of silence. A radio station is currently running a campaign against free SHS. During the last election, I got the clear impression free SHS had been endorsed by all political parties, and all we needed to do was to keep improving it. Would a spirited defense of the free SHS policy constitute an attack on press freedom? I wonder. It cannot be that everyone has a right to reply except members of the government and officials. Nor can it be that challenging an opinion expressed by a journalist constitutes an attack on press freedom. What I believe may be sorely lacking in our society today is the need to listen to each other more. Knowledge has never been a gift granted exclusively to one group. We must listen and hear each other more. And for me personally, I find it ironic that the presidency of a man who has been and continues to be daily the most vilified political figure of his generation can be accused of presiding over a culture of silence. There's no midnight knock on the door in Ghana for authors of dissenting views, nor will there be during my presidency. Indeed, one of the reasons assigned by the global social media platform Twitter for its decision to establish its operational headquarters in Africa in Ghana was that, and I quote, "Ghana is a supporter of free speech, online freedom, and the open internet," unquote. These qualities possessed by our nation also influenced the decision by the Federation of African Journalists to announce the holding of its annual conference in Ghana this year because of Ghana's attachment to a culture and practice of
Right, so that's the president at a function at University of Ghana, I think University of Cape Coast, and I think that was, no, University of Education Winneba it must have been, and that was either one of the congregation of the university. Let me begin by asking Efia Pokuah if she feels that there's anything wrong with what the president said. Evans thinks that the manner of looking at getting feedback for the free SHS and tagging the journalists doing that work as running a campaign against it can feed into party people attacking journalists or anybody at all wanting to attack journalists. Efia, do you share that view?
Well, let me thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having me. And forgive me if I sound a little nasal because I'm not too well. But okay. I thought that you were going to come to me about my reality as well, because I have quite
just this in a minute, and then go to your reality.
Okay. I was a little disappointed with the president in his comments, because I remember in a couple of years, he was the same person who said that he prefers a robust media that is somewhat aggressive than a dormant media that goes with the status quo. And for somebody like himself, who's been a freedom fighter from the Kumi Preku days and all that, that is a complete opposite of his usual rhetoric. And I always take myself to my former colleague, Kojo Asaribafo Champon Kaba, and the fantastic question he asked the president at one of the media encounters, whether the presidency has tamed him. Because this would have been not the Nana Akufo-Addo we know from back in the day. But I think to also be fair to him, that government officials also have a right to rebuttal. And nobody is saying that government officials and heads of government institutions do not have a right to rebuttal, because we all know that everybody has a right to fair hearing. And this is something that is basic standard in law. Everyone knows, including the president. So we are not saying that. But I think that is very worrying when it comes from the first gentleman of the land. And these are the things, like Evans says, party foot soldiers kind of pick on these things and they go haywire to the extent of bullying people. And when the president says, he mentioned something about the definition of press freedom and quoted the reasons for Twitter even setting up their headquarters in Ghana. But I think that the definition of press freedom and the definition of state actors and state institutions or the culture of silence, it's not static, especially in this era where we have seen technology and the expansion of the media waves, even into new media. We cannot continue to use the same method or definition we're using 20 years ago, because things have changed. I would have wished that the president and other media actors, like the Minister of Information, would have openly admitted that there are abuses. There are abuses. I have my issues with this report because I think that the report is completely biased against women. I have been attacked so many times and I did not see that in the report. I did not see my threat in the 2020 election that forced me out of the country. I had to flee the country. I did not see that in the report. Completely biased against the women. And if we take this year's theme, International Women's Day theme, breaking the bias, I think that this report didn't do justice to the theme and the rights of women, because all the issues and the examples that were cited were all male journalists. And that is not to say, like Sewam here said, that female journalists have not been attacked within the period under review, but they were all not captured. But to the president's issue, I am a little disappointed that he took it in that context, especially not acknowledging the fact that there are abuses from both sides, and he is responsible as the head of the government and as the leader of his political party to speak about, or at least acknowledge, the abuses that come from his side, which is MPP. And there are so many of them. So we are not talking about the good ones. We know.
Not exactly to seek your reaction, but when you speak about being disappointed also in the Information Ministry and their statement, the statement signed by Kwadwo Nkrumah, the conclusion is significant. He says that Ghana's democracy is a work in progress. Overall, therefore, government welcomes the report as a baseline reference document against which press freedom in our country may be gauged in the coming years. And in this response, you could say it is measured, it is welcoming of the report to a large measure, and speaking about what to do to remedy the circumstances. So is it fair to be disappointed in that, as it were, reaction?
I think it is fair to have a right to an opinion, and this is my opinion. So right. I think the government could have done more. And I'm coming from a place of expectation. I think often government, especially MPP government, gets it wrong because of the expectation. I think that they underestimate the expectation that people, including the media, have of them. It is because of their own history. It's because of their own history. They have a history that is completely different from NDC. NDC comes from a revolution. Their first manifesto was signed by President Rawlings, who was Chairman Rawlings, with his blood. NDC is known to have a history of not being entirely, media friendly. So, and that is completely opposite from MPP, which is coming from a tradition where they portray themselves, at least to a large extent, before the period before 92 Constitution, were more media friendly. In 2012, I think in 2016, we in multimedia at the time, and I was with multimedia, we were called regime changes. The MPP portrayed itself as we are the fighters of media freedom. And when NDC was in power, every time the media has come under attack, it is the MPP that would rise to the occasion and support the media. So what has changed? That's what I'm saying, that it is with that expectation that you want to place the MPP above the NDC in terms of expectation. And therefore, you don't want the ministry or government to just acknowledge it.
You don't think whilst in opposition, they were just taking advantage for the political gain? Like
probably,
any
but there's a track record. Probably, but there's a track record. I've given you the days, especially with the President, His Excellency Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo. He has an enviable position, a different, an exclusive position that is unique to him because of his history and his record. And he himself alluded to the fact in his speech by saying that somebody like him, he is surprised that under his regime, the media is being abused or touted as he himself. And that is where the expectation comes in. The work he's done over the years in Kumipeku, the kind of relationship he's had with the media, that is why the expectation is there. That under his leadership, under no circumstance should we have abuses of this nature. Even if it's 10%, we shouldn't have abuses of this. And that's where the differences in the two traditions in terms of NDC and MPP comes in. That's where I have my own issues.
Yeah, so you wanted to speak about your reality, gauging that against the reports.
Yes. And so we have heard Manasseh, other people who have spoken. I think our senior auntie Liz is there. She has many decades in the area. Some of us used to look up to her when we were seeing her faces on Breakfast Show or another platform, including Newsfile back in the day. But I have been a victim of attack twice under MPP Congress, another MPP Congress, first MPP Congress in La Trade Fair, another MPP Congress, 2007, thereabouts in Kumasi. And then the famous NHIS case, which we took to court. You were my lawyer in the matter and won the case. And that is why I think that the report is somewhat inadequate presenting the issue, because I think the issue is even worse than it is. And I worry when people try to play politics with these media reports, including government itself, because the last media press freedom report that came, government was patting itself on the back, we've done well. This is not about government and this is not about opposition. What worries me particularly is that over the years, we have used these reports as when the party is in government, they use it against the other, and whoever is in opposition use this against whoever is in government without looking at the impact of the journalists, of the media industry. Something, I am doing an exit plan for myself. Exit plan for myself to leave the media. Why? Because of these things. We can no longer continue, and I'm not the only one. We've had several media people who are exiting the industry and moving into public relations, moving into corporate communications because it's safer, no attacks emotionally and physically. Like I said in 2020 election, I had to flee the country for a month and return later when the coast was clear. This is not captured in the report. Other journalists were attacked. That wasn't the only person. Even media organizations that I thought were supposed to support me at the time left me. I had to go to the police headquarters myself, file a complaint. The police director, CID, said, oh, why don't you put it together? All your colleagues and other people, media people who have been attacked, put it together as one complaint. And nobody was ready to do it. Why? Something because of the same reasons. Some of them have been captured in this report.
Yeah,
so
but I need to remind you that this is 2013 to now. So
2013 to now.
So if the issues you are speaking about before 2013 are not captured, that's the explanation.
Okay. Well, then the 2020 election should have been captured. Why was my attack? Because there's a report at the police headquarters. I filed a complaint with the police headquarters. The complaint was forwarded to the cybercrime unit. Why was the report not capturing that? So the report is inadequate. And that's why I question, is it because I am a woman, so I am not important? So if I die, my life is not important? Why should I risk my job the next time to cover the next election? That's why I've said 2024 elections, I am not anything going to cover it. So this international organization,
you are not suggesting that by your exit plan, you will not be in the industry by 2024. Is that what you mean?
I will not be in the industry. I will not be in the industry, something.
And you won't because of the fear of attacks. Is that what you're saying?
Because of the fear of attacks, and there's nobody to support you, something. Where was the GJ? Where was the GJ when I was attacked 2020? And I sat on TV and said, 2 people came to my office, nearly made it to my studio. And this is not a joking matter. I had to install 10 cameras in my house, but still I wasn't sleeping. So I sleep during the day and monitor the cameras throughout the night. But this is not fair.
Yeah,
and this is a report. The report never captured this.
If you're sorry, but if you are talking about election periods, I suppose for serious media houses, particularly those of us who do projection of the election results, it is not a new thing that during those periods, we get security, we get special security, either private or whatever it is. Our homes are guarded among others because of the real threat that come at us. So during election time, that will not be different.
Yes, it wasn't. In fact, it was because of one of these private security arrangements that we had done at Despite Media. That is what saved me. Without that private security arrangement, probably I would have died. And if I take you back to 2012, Evans and myself were to announce the election results, and we had done the collation in the newsroom at Multimedia. We were about to call the results, and those collators came and said, look, I think it was around 2:45 a.m. at dawn. We have the results. Kaba left. He was too scared. Kofi Adoma left. He was too scared. I think Captain, he was like, look, I can't do this. They were scared. I was the woman with the boldness and said, I will go and do it. And I had done my shift, 8 hours or 12 hours, but I said I'll still go on and do it. So we simultaneously planned it. Evan was to go 12:45 a.m. I was to go at Akan. So I had to call my contacts in the armed forces, have them lined up on the streets of Joy FM before we went on air. And between myself and Kwesichum, he knows the arrangement that we did in the night before we went on air. That was 2012 elections.
The point.
And after the results, after we announced it, we have threats from MPP supporters.
Yes, so
NPP supporters. That was 2012.
Yeah, so
2016.
the period you are talking about, I can testify. I also had threat. I believe I may have handed over to Evans at the point to go take a rest so that it is continued. And for example, I got a call from one of the leading members, who was a good friend, saying things that were very threatening. But because of the security I had within my house, even though my family was uncomfortable about it and so on, I was a bit okay with that. So my issue is that we know that it's a risky job to be projecting elections. So if we're doing that, how do we, project that into this report about self-censorship, about safety of journalists, and the fears?
I think sometimes this is what has led us to all these things that are captured in the report, safety of journalists. Because if it happens all too often and not much is done, except for the political advantage that both NDC and MPP use against each other, then the journalists become a commodity or an endangered species. And that is why most of the talented people in the industry are leaving, going on early retirement.
What happened to you 2016? You were going to talk about that.
Well, 2016, we had similar reports when we called the elections for MPP. Also, threats from NDC on the other side. So that's why I want us to look at this in both ways. I've seen people talk about this report and using it against MPP. And during the days of NDC, when the report came out, MPP members were also using it against President Mahama. And they said, oh, this is a media person who has become president, and under his watch, this is happening. So the kind of expectation that we have of our leaders, I think both NDC and MPP have fallen short of that. In the 2015 case that we took to court with Efiapoko and others versus NHIS, we were expecting, I particularly, as a friend of President Mahama, was expecting him personally to come out and condemn it. No. In the case of Manasseh's issue, we were expecting President Akufo-Addo, His Excellency, to come out and condemn it. We haven't seen it. So I'm saying that there are double standards from both sides, and it is no longer comfortable, and we should not allow politicians and the political class to continue to take advantage of the abuses of the media. When the media people have become victimized, and I worry that GJA, National Media Commission, have reduced this whole thing about safety of journalists, the economic issue, to just releasing statements, and that's what, and it ends there. And nobody cares if the next moment, if Efiapoko is going to be the next person on the obituary.
Okay.
Nobody cares, and that is where my worry is.
Okay.
We must go beyond just the rhetoric of discussing the reports when it comes out.
All right, thank you.
Actually formulating policies and laws that work, not laws for fashion, not laws for entertainment.
Okay, thank you. Now, Nanaya, let me bring you in at this point. And, for example, the issue Efia talks about, and I was their lawyer, and there was a criminal prosecution. The state obviously was disinterested. So the criminal prosecution didn't go anywhere. It was the one that multimedia paid for, as in the civil prosecution, that was pursued to the end and was successful. When you hear the questions about threats against journalists going unpunished, and even the recall to the murder of Ahmed Swale, and then the threats to Erastus Asare Donko about the Ejura shootings coverage, that they say a government official, a state official, has issued this threat and there's no punishment. How do you process the fact that these, impact greatly some of these reports?
Well, I can completely understand everything that everybody has said from their own personal experience. There's a fair deal of truth in what each of your contributors has said. This comes from their personal experience of working in what they describe as an atmosphere of intimidation. that is highly politicized. So it is not, one would say, in any way peculiar to a current dispensation. What we have is a culture of over-politicization of our media outlets and over-politicization of general commentary, some of which does not conform to any standards of professionalism, will not subject itself to any kind of regulation, takes place in a completely free-for-all space. The report from Reporters Sans Frontières remarks that one of the particular changes between its last report, the 2021 report and the 2022 report, has been the vast growth in online news media.
That's right.
And when you talk about online news media, sometimes those are platforms run by reputable news organizations such as the Multimedia Group, sometimes run by other reputable organizations such as the one I work for, but also a kind of completely uncensored, uninhibited, and quite frankly, worrying media space to do with the way our social media in particular work. So when, for example, you talk about, or other of your contributors have talked about, the insults at which they're at the receiving end of, particularly talking about Sewa Mihia and Ifyapokwade, and I'm very glad both of them spoke, because I do think that there's a very genderized element to this. But when you talk about them, there is a difficulty with very much defining what you would say are state actors or not. Again, if Yapokwa referred to that. You yourself, Samson, in your introduction earlier on, spoke, for example, about the rebuttal, or if you like, the letter of complaint written by Elizabeth Ohene to the news editor who was responsible for the BBC Trending programme that alleged that there was a culture of, if you like, crackdown at the moment on journalists, and referred to her as being in government. I mean, question of definition there, whether Elizabeth Ohene actually is in government. She certainly is the head of a state institution. She is no longer a member of a serving government. But obviously she has political allegiance, which is to the ruling party, happens to be in power at the moment. When the scales turn with changes in political fortunes, you get virtually the same set of accusations being bowled at the other side. What, without wishing to in any way downplay the importance of the fears that have been expressed by your journalist contributors to date. For example, Evans talking about what he feels is a growing culture of self-censorship in the newsroom. What I would like to emphasize is, if you like, the responsibilities that come with free speech. Yes, it is right that nothing should be beyond the consideration of any journalist. But we should present our cases with facts, as has been said earlier on, and with a sort of sense of responsibility and regard for balance. So where you have, if you like, the push against that is again in what Evan spoke about, which is the need to whip things up, to make it as controversial as possible, because that's the name of the game in journalism. You need the headlines, you need the pizzazz, and you need the buzz around the story that you're running. And so there is this very fine line between adducing facts or presenting facts against the case and, if you like, the desire to add some extra fire, some fuel beneath the pot in order to get it to boil even more vigorously and to attract the public's attention. Now, my experience personally of journalism has been largely in the UK, working at the back end of things with very little commentary. But I'll say that from my little experience, not even of reaction to things that I have published, but just, for example, taking pictures of events. There is a culture in this country of a generalized lack of tolerance to public exposure. So the first experience I had of this was maybe about 10 years ago in Kumasi, where I happened to be wandering around town, came across what I thought was an anniversary parade near the military museum and was taking pictures of it, and was probably approached by the parade commander, who demanded to delete or ordered me to delete the pictures that I had taken. I wasn't carrying the kind of camera where you could delete pictures, a pretty old-fashioned camera, so I told him as such. And quite frankly, I can't understand the rationale of holding an event in a public space and saying that members of the public who are walking by cannot take pictures of it.
Yeah, it happens quite often in this country.
It happens all the time. It happens all the time. And perhaps, inform some of the cases that we've heard about, for example, the journalists who were assaulted during the coverage of the COVID-19 restrictions and so on. To equate that with state actors, even though we're talking about the Ghana Armed Forces in this particular case, I don't think I would do. Would I extend that to what I would describe as a generalized culture of me as an off-duty journalist operating in a free environment, having my rights trampled on? No, I just think it's general heavy-handedness on the part of people in positions of authority. The second example was recently, about a year ago, when, again, I happened to be strolling around and noticed bulldozers going in on a local site, which had been occupied by squatters with kiosk shops, tabletop businesses, that sort of thing, for years. And they seem to be clearing it and to be in a lot of a hurry to clear it out. There's a crowd of people standing around watching. Again, I happen to have my phone on me. I think I'll take some pictures. Was probably spotted by the guards who were supervising the people with the bulldozers, who came and lifted me physically off the land, took my phone, were threatening to do things with it. So although my main objective obviously was not to get hurt, I snatched my phone back, managed to get away as they made obscene gestures at me. To me, that's just a generalized culture of the way women are treated in public life. I wouldn't say that it was the work of state actors or business interests or anything of the kind. So while I think I understand that coming from the point of view of the journalists who have worked for a long time entirely based in this country, I, like Sewa, have only been operating in the Ghanaian sphere for the past 4. I would counter that I think perhaps what they're saying is both the product of the weight of experience and is perfectly within their rights, but also, the question of the Reporters Sans Frontières report becomes a convenient springboard for certain things that have been shored up for a number of years. And experiences such as Ifya Pokwa's in election after election. What one needs is both a sense from journalists that they will take their own reputation and their own powers and their responsibilities with the full weight of seriousness that attaches to them.
Okay. So I'm coming to the proffering of the solutions. I would like that you would list a number of solutions that you want to share and share them so clearly so we can all benefit.
Yes, that's exactly what I was getting round to.
Yes, because I wanted to come back so that you just go about that, not now, if you permit me.
Right, okay. If just to round up,
right.
I would say, again, a problem with the reaction to this report published by the Reporters Sans Frontières is, again, what I think the philosophers describe as a category error. So it is a report that is not for 2022. It covers events that took place in 2021. It's interesting that, for example, a country such as Burkina Faso ranks slightly above Ghana in the index results, even though Burkina Faso is a country where in the past year 2 foreign journalists have been killed. One doesn't wish to suggest that somehow foreign journalists are subjected to different standards of assessment from national journalists in the countries that are being discussed. And it seems somehow, again, in the generalized report made by RSF, as if it is not a ranking for just 1 year. It is an overview, if you like, that is the sum total of tracking over a number of years.
That's right.
When this is applied to what is supposed to be an annual ranking, I would suggest that that is a problem, because what an annual ranking should track is the change between 1 year and the next. So perhaps there is again some blurring of the boundaries there. Furthermore, I think it would be helpful if we were to understand that the response by political actors, and I've already said that I think that the media and commentary in general, not just media proper, are ludicrously over-politicized in this country. Even your choice of water or tissue paper is politicized in Ghana. But where there is to be a response or rebuttal or reaction to what is perceived as critical commentary by any journalist, you wouldn't expect the actors to sit still and not defend themselves. Rebuttal, as Ifya said, is a normal part of political journalism. And any kind of journalism business does exactly the same thing. What one would not wish for is a sense that the rebuttal comes with threats. And where the rebuttal does come with threats, that the organizations such as the Ghana Journalists Association and the National Media Commission are armed with the tools that they need to step in and defend the position of journalists. So rebuttal comes with the job, and I think if you're a journalist, you have to develop the thick skin somehow to let it roll off the skin and not let it so influence you that you decide that somehow you have to remain silent. There is nothing, according even to the RSF report, to suggest that journalists in this country do not work in an atmosphere where there are the tools at their disposal to be critical. What very often worries is the response, particularly where the response comes from people who are seen to be closely allied to agents of power, and where the complaints against them go. But that also might be part of a generalized problem of pursuing justice in this country and how effectively it works. I don't think it's peculiar to just journalism.
Right. So let me bring on Liz and Mr. Afemoni for very quick, because I will need them to help us to do a good conclusion to the discussion because of the background that Liz Heffron Asare brings and Afemoni also will bring to this discussion. Now, thank you very much for your patience indeed. Now, Nanaya Mensah spoke about situations where the actors or the perpetrators of the breaches of the rights of journalists to work and even their constitutional rights, you know, in covering stories and the rest, may not be people who have anything to do with government. And yet it feeds into what eventually becomes our ranking description as a government being intolerant of criticism and the rest of them. I gave an example in the course of this week when we're discussing this matter, and this is an issue that just happened. So, Liz, what do we make about such situations? How do we isolate those situations if we must? The Daily Graphic reporter, Emmanuel Ebo-Hodgson, did a story about a court case ongoing live in the Supreme Court. And then 3 lawyers who are involved in the case appeared before the courts and started condemning the journalist, impugning his professionalism, and saying that he had done the story about the case in a manner that was defamatory to their client. One of them says his client, that's a bank. Then 2 other lawyers joined. In the end, they convinced the judge that they need to hold the journalist to the court to disclose his source, because they allege that the journalist was not in court when the case was being heard on the day that he filed the reports. And secondly, that there were court processes that had been filed and had not yet been argued, and yet his report referenced some of these court processes. So he was ordered to come to court and on oath explain the content of his publication to the court, and then disclose his source, since he was not in court and could not have, according to them, could not have access to the pending processes they had filed. These were private lawyers who were very serious about what they needed, and actually suggested at a point that even if he had to come to the courtroom, he needed a permission of the registrar of the court or a court official, and suggested again that the matter was not a matter of public interest. If he had to report on it, it had to be sanctioned by the court. The court actually issued the order, and he was supposed to appear. And the consequence would have been that if he didn't disclose his source, and if his explanations were not good to the court, he could go to jail. So we filed an application to get an expanded panel of the court to say that the order of the court is unlawful because he had not done anything wrong. If what he did was defamatory, they can issue civil rates. If what he had done was contemptuous, then there must be a contempt proceeding, and not a court just invites anybody to come to court to speak, otherwise they'll be punished. Thankfully, we explained to the court, and then he was not compelled to mount the witness box, and the case is over. These are private lawyers, and this is their thinking. And yet, this will feed into such reports. Is it not possible to isolate these things? Yes, Liz, please unmute.
I would want to investigate further, so I'll ask you a few questions before I attempt to answer.
Right.
These are private lawyers. They're representing a bank that is a public institution.
That is right.
Or the bank is also private.
The bank is a public institution, and there are private individuals also involved in the case.
Definitely. So those who probably are stakeholders in the bank, that's where they put their monies, would be interested in a case like this, because should it go against the bank, what is the rippling effect towards its customers? So then I would shudder to call them private lawyers, because they are representing a bank that is a public institution. So they have moved from private individuals into a public space. Will I call them state actors? Maybe not.
I'm sorry. The bank is a private bank, but you know that our law now sees the banks as public institutions rather than private.
Yes, because it is offering a public service.
That's right.
So definitely it comes into the public space. So definitely everybody who is a customer to the bank is interested in what is happening in the bank. So you can't say that the public is not interested and it is a private thing. It is not. Because the bank operates because of its customers, and its customers have a stake in the bank. So I won't call it a private thing. So definitely the public is interested it is of public interest to know exactly what is going on, and therefore anybody who goes to find out information and publishes it is doing it in the interest of customers of the bank and the public at large.
Okay. Having heard the journalists who have spoken, Evans Mensah, Manasseh Azuri-Awene, Sewa Amehie, Ifya Pokua, and Nanaya Mensah, what will you say?
I'm coming back to the ratings that we had, or the rankings that we had.
That's right.
And how our rankings have been described by the Reporters Without Borders. And if you look at it, our overall ranking, when it says we had 67.43, is problematic. And anything that is problematic needs to be addressed as quickly as possible if we want to resort to having an open space and having a free media that is doing its work without fear or favor. If you look at the political sphere also, the political context is also problematic. We have satisfactory for the legal framework and for the sociocultural context.
Yeah.
And we all know what that means. Our economic and our safety is difficult. And when I went through the report, you realize that further down you have Cyprus and Hungary, who, even though are lower down the line, when it comes to safety of journalists, it is good. So it means that when it comes to safety of journalists, it is above 85%. So we need to look at it holistically. I don't think that we should look at it individually. If we do that, then we're doing ourselves a great disservice. Our overall ranking is on all these put together.
Right.
So if it's problematic, then we need to deal with all the issues that have been raised.
A major issue that is raised is self-censorship. And if you listen to almost all of them, of course, with the exception of Nanaya Mensah, who brings a different perspective, they have, at least at one time, entertained self-censorship. Are they justified from the basis they give for this self-censorship?
If you come under attack, or if you're abused or assaulted or harassed in your line of work, you definitely will want to take caution. You definitely will want to take caution because you know a list of journalists who have suffered and died as a result of putting themselves out there, and nothing has been done. There have been no solutions to the killing of judges from 2007, is it 2007 or 2005, when Samuel Inin was killed.
Right.
And up to now, it has not been brought to a logical conclusion. No perpetrators have been apprehended. So if you're working in that space as a journalist, there definitely would be some fear. And when there's some fear... Does it
matter that his assassination has no proven state linkage, linked to the state?
No, it doesn't matter. The fact that he was a journalist doing his trade, and got killed, you would even expect that even with such a thing, because it has no state linking, would have been dealt with quickly, just to make journalists safe and secure, just to make journalists know that, okay, we are the ruling government, but we have got your back. We don't get that. You don't get that. And then even when...
But you live in a society where, forgive me, you live in a society where that is actually not exclusive. What happened is not exclusive to journalists. There are many unsolved murders. So why?
I agree, there are many unsolved murders, but you would want to believe that the journalist, it's not because he harmed somebody or he went out and did something. It is as a result of maybe some reportage that he had done that was not favorable or that did not sound too well with a certain group of people. Like the others have said, each time you do a report, you have people call you to tell you, we'll come after you. You have to do A, you have to do B. Everybody in this country is a journalist and knows how we should work. and therefore would want to tell us what they want to see in our newspapers or hear on our radio stations and on our TV stations. But that is not the way we operate. That is not the way we work. And so we should stand together as journalists. And I always call the GJA out. Sewa said it very clearly. They would put out statements and it will end there. They would have photo opportunities with you and it will be put out and it will end there. Why can't the GJA in itself stand and say that, no, we should make sure that whatever has happened, this should go to a logical conclusion. Let us see what we can do. Let us see how we can help our journalists go out and feel secure, feel safe. But no, even as we stand as GJA, there's a lot of division in GJA. I keep saying that GJA to me, when it started becoming polarized, I pulled out. I stopped paying my dues. I stopped going for GJA functions because I didn't see what we were doing as an association to back our own. And if we can't back our own, who do we want to back?
Talking about the GJA, I'll take a quick break now and return, but let me have your view on this question. The GJA, there are many of the journalists who have gotten in harm's way, who have been attacked, assaulted one way or the other. They're actually not members of the GJA, but the GJA takes it as a responsibility to issue a statement. Beyond that, and I know for a fact, beyond that, not all the cases that they have issued a statement that ended there. Some of them, they have moved beyond that and contacted lawyers, myself inclusive, to ask us to assist. And we have taken some of these cases up. In a situation where majority of the circumstances, the people do not actually belong to the guild. Why do we leave out the media institutions that they work for? If you're a journalist in multimedia and you got attacked or you got offended in a way that can be redressed in a court, multimedia will pay lawyers to go to court. They won't wait for GJA.
Agreed. But you see, when you have a situation where you are speaking for journalists, whether they are part of you or not, you owe it a responsibility to ask, how would you get people come join you if you are not speaking for them or if you're not making them see that you have their interest at heart? If you need to get them to join you because you want to have all of them under an umbrella, then you probably would be speaking for them up front. Again, I was of the view, and people disagree with me, and I keep saying that GJA should be like all the other professional bodies. If you're not trained, if you're not qualified, if you're not licensed, you do not become a member of the journalist profession. You have lawyers do it, you have architects do it, you have doctors do it. Why is it that when it comes to journalists, nobody wants to take that up and nobody wants to ensure that we have very qualified people in our association with us who are working and who are being responsible and making sure that everything that we do is clear cut. When you have that, I don't think when the doctors are in default or when they do something that is not right, the medical association comes in immediately. When people's licenses have to be withdrawn, it's not withdrawn by any state, it's withdrawn by the medical association. Why can't we do the same thing for us?
Okay, I will take a break here, and when I return, Mr. Philmoni, you'll pardon me, I'd like to speak to Okatechie Efrifa Mensah before I come to you. This is Newsfile, and my guests have been Evans Mensah, Manasseh Azuriawene, Nana Ya Mensah, Philmoni, Liz Hefron Asare, Efia Pokua, Sewa Amehe, and Okatechie Efrifa Mensah. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as always, we put Ghana first. We're discussing the damaging World Press Freedom Report about Ghana. and my guest, Evans Mensah, Manasseh Azura Wene, Nanaya Mensah, Afil Moni, Liz Hefron Asari, Ifia Pokua, Sewa Amihe, and Okatiche, Frifa Mensah, media practitioner and the chief. Thank you, Okatiche Frifa Mensah, for joining us on Newsfile.
Thank you very much, Samson.
Right. So the journalists we have spoken to so far have been telling us what their reality is. Gauging that against the report, does your reality affirm the ranking, very embarrassing, that we have received? What are the facts?
Samson, thank you very much. I would like to apologize for joining the conversation late. I was actually working when I finished. That is when I had the chance to join the conversation. Talk of my reality. I'm sure everybody will attest to the fact that we don't need any reports anywhere to ascertain the dangers that faces journalists today in Ghana. Some of us have experienced this thing for the past 4 to 5 years, which led to us even moving from houses that we used to work for. It doesn't only happen through physical threats, but sometimes even when you are on air working, because the media houses we have in this country are largely owned by these politicians, they tend to tell you what to say, what not to say. They tend to send you a message when you say something and it doesn't go on well with them. They come out at you. Even when you are working, you receive so many messages from your bosses and say, why have you said this? Why do you say this? Why don't you say that? So it gets a bit frustrating that at some point you have to just tender in your resignation and leave, because it cannot be that you will sit down on a media platform and as you're working, you are being micromanaged like a robot. So that sometimes you have to just tender in and leave. Moving away from being micromanaged, which it happens to almost all the media practitioners in Ghana, especially those who are not paid well and are at the back pocket of the politicians. Then becomes the physical threat. Where
but before that, forgive me, before that, are you saying not wanting to be micromanaged is the reason you have moved from one media platform to the next?
Well, I wouldn't say that is largely the sole reason, but it was part of the reasons. In the run-up to the 2020 election, I was on another media platform, and in the course of doing my job, I used to have what they call emancipation movement, where I tried to emancipate the minds of the people, because I've said that the only reason this country is peaceful is because the people do not understand what goes on around them. So I tell them what is happening, present them with the facts, then emancipating them whatever they want to use those information for. But in the run-up to 2020 election, I had government officials coming from the top of my management and saying that, no, you cannot continue with that program anymore. In fact, it gets a bit frustrating. So if you don't want to do that, then what other option do you have? You have to just move away from that platform. So it was one of the reasons that made me tender in my resignation at where I used.
Okay, so that was a good thing you did, because the tenets of your profession are that you are supposed to be independent. If you lose that, you have lost everything. If anybody tried to dictate to me wrongly here from being independent, that's the very day I'll quit the job. And I've never had a situation where anybody attempted to dictate what I have to do, which is professional. Please proceed.
But Samson, not many of us can actually do what I did or what some of us will do. Because one, if you read the report touched on the fact that most journalists in this country are not being paid well. And you and I know when people are not paid well and they are the back pocket of the politician, obviously they lose their voices. Instead of being guard dogs for the people, they become watchdogs for the politicians. So why should such a journalist who is not being paid well by media owners be able to speak up and say that if you're going to take my voice away from me, then you should take up your job? Maybe the person doesn't have what he's going to feed on. So in this saying, I must encourage media practitioners and owners to pay journalists was so they can have the self-confidence to be able to stand up to these kind of bullies that we are experiencing, especially under this regime. You know, one of the things happened, fiscal threat. Samson, as I speak to you, anytime I close from work or when I am going home in the evenings, because of the physical threat that has come closer to me, I needed to go and buy bulletproof. Bulletproof, which in the evenings when I am going home and I feel that I am not safe because somebody has called. You know these hooligans who have been given these quotas and uniforms claiming to be national security. Meanwhile, they have no training in national security matters. They sometimes will call you, they will threaten you, telling you that we will come after you. Even just 4 days ago, there were some boys of this nature, these hooligans who are termed as national security at Koforidua, somewhere older state, sitting down saying that by 2024, the Okateche guy, we will deal with him. So if you get these kind of messages, then it puts you in a position where sometimes you don't even sleep home for 2-3 days, and you have to be making sure that your families are safe and all that. So the threats are real. It is not a joke.
But that's a serious one. Have you lodged a complaint formally with the police?
Well, behind the scenes I have, but I'll give details. In fact, I had to even talk to IGP at some point, which I told you some of the threats that are facing some of us. Look, aside you getting calls from these hooligans, you know we used to be part of this government one way or the other. So we have friends in the top positions who will call you and tell you that, Charlie, my people are not happy with what you are doing at all. So you have to be careful. It is a bit dangerous. Then you ask them, what is the worst that can happen? And they can go to the extent to do the worst that you can ever happen. Trust me. They can do the worst because people that are in top hierarchy position call you and warn you. Look, when I went for the 5th anniversary of the Asante Nima, I was wearing my cloth, doing my chieftaincy, and when I had security officials whispering to my ears that it is being discussed on various platforms that I have to be arrested in no time. It had to be the calling of one of my godfathers in Ghana to the National Security Minister to back up because it's of no use and it's not necessary. So aside these hooligans coming after you, the police is being used to intimidate people in this country. Wherever you find yourself working, you get your bosses coming after you because government says they are not happy with what you say or what you not say. What makes it a bit surprising to some of us who campaign vehemently for this government to come to power is that if these things were happening under Jerry John Rawlings, it would have been okay because everybody believes that he was from a military mindset, a dictator's mindset. If these things were happening under before, it would have been a bit okay because we were coming from J.J. Rawlings' era, which he couldn't be so sure what the media would do if he gives them the space. Professor Mills, because he was once a vice president to J.J. Rawlings, one would have thought that he would come in with the British mindset. He never did. John Mahama used to be J.J.'s boy, so obviously people think that he will come in with a bit of this British mindset. Look, I spoke vehemently against John Dramani Mahama's government, and at no point did I feel threatened, did I feel my life was in danger. But surprisingly, under the leadership of somebody that we all campaigned and touted to be a human rights activist that spoke vehemently against J.J. Rawlings, the abuse of the media, for him to assume the reins of power and under his leadership, journalists do not feel safe. Trust me, it is appalling. It is real. We don't need any report to confirm that journalists are not safe under this government. Journalists are scared to speak up.
Let's take the example of where security officers have encountered journalists and asked them delete the recording you have on your gadgets. Sometimes a public event and people are covering and yet they are asked to delete. If a security officer is dealing with a journalist in that manner, what do you want the president to do? Because your focus is the president. What do you want the president to do? What has the president done wrong in that regard?
Samson, you see, when the overreaching arms of government do things and it does not get curtailed or it does not get watched, then it gives the other security practice like the policeman who can just tell a journalist to believe. It gives them some level of impetus to act, because after all, it happened and nobody unchecked. It happened and nobody got punished. Somebody, a member of parliament, can put an image of a journalist on a live TV and say that when you meet the person, beat the person and kill the person, and I will pay wherever this matter goes to. The same person comes and say that I know who killed Ahmed Swali, but nothing gets done in about a month, 2, 3, 4. What it does is that it will give these security guys the impetus to do what they do sometimes. Because when government did it, nobody punished them. When a member of parliament did it, nobody punished them. So why, if the security guy does it, anybody will punish them? When we have a government that does these things with impunity, it only goes ahead to give them the impetus to do what they do. That is what I'm trying to say.
You should be familiar with the term media tyranny or tyranny of the media. Right. Whilst media advocates and experts do not like us to discuss irresponsibility on the part of media persons in such times, do you think that the media, and whilst an irresponsible conduct should not attract physical attack or even verbal attack, what do you think these also contribute to the responses or reactions that we are complaining about?
Samson, you see, I think over time we've made the politicians and the political actors have this kind of feeling that it is their bona fide right for practitioners to do things in their favor. And for that matter, when things don't go the way they expect, they act the way they do. If a media practitioner goes against the values, the ethics, and the principles of journalism, are there not laid down rules and regulations? Are there not institutions that they are supposed to be reported to, like the National Media Commission? And for that matter, these are the institutions that we as a nation have agreed that if any media house, if any media practitioner goes beyond the boundaries that they are supposed to act, you send these reports to these institutions, and you don't go on with physical threats and physical harm and all that. So yes, the media as it stands now, some of them act unprofessionally. Some of them assumes the autonomy of wanting to be the superpower because he has the microphone and the cameras, in front of them. But if they go beyond the parameters set for them to act, no political actor has any right, any business to go on and be threatening them with these harms and threats that comes our way. So yes, the media practitioners sometimes go overboard, but the politicians have the right to act the way they do sometimes.
All right. Hold on for me. Let me go to Afil Money now. And gentlemen and ladies, thank you so very much for your patience. After speaking to Afil Money, I'd like to come to you round briefly. List your solutions suggested to what your reality is. Yes, quickly, come in.
I had just wished to state that, you see, we the media are supposed to check these politicians and other state actors like the judiciary for them to do the right thing. But when we have a case where the Journalists Association that was set up from 1949 till today has not been able to put their house in order for over 2 years, the leadership cannot even run a proper elections for us to have a running institution, then it gives these politicians the kind of impetus to act the way they act. Because the Ghana Journalists Association, which used to be a tigorous body that will speak like the Ghana Bar Association, that government will shiver, now it has become defunct. They cannot actually defend anybody in this country. So it makes no politician or political actors become afraid of the journalists and the Ghana Journalists Association. So as our president is about to speak, I would like him to touch on why for 2 years almost, they have not been able to run a successful elections to have leadership in place to get the Ghana Journalists Association to work. Maybe he can touch on that as he's about to speak.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, let's hear from Afemoni. You spoke on World Press Freedom Day. You said that the World Press Freedom Index is depressing. You don't find anything wrong with the report?
Samson, as we speak, our hearts are bleeding profusely over the precipitous fall from 30th to the 60th position globally, and from 3rd to the 10th position continentally. A confluence of factors have been outlined in the report, and I thank my colleagues for their anatomic analysis and sometimes the emotional digestion of the issue. But we need to filter this report through the lenses of reality. And the reality is that we have a responsibility collectively to reverse this trend. But before I come out, I go forward with my suggestions. Let me express our solicitude with the number of journalists, but certain journalists who face preponderance of threats in their line of duty. We will continue to stand by them. We will continue to speak out stridently against the threats they face, and we will urge them not to shrink and not to lose out by continuing to do their work without fear or favor. Journalism is not a profession for the lily-livered. Journalism is not a profession for the chicken-hearted. And Samson, you gave an example that you continue to do your work unafraid and unintimidated. This is our calling. On the part of GJ, we do not only criticize, do not issue statements. And I was relieved when he gave one example of how you've rallied to our support, how you've been serving as a lawyer to address some of the threats against journalists. One simple example, when Sechua of Multimedia was molested by Haja Fatih, Samson, you and I remember that we, with urgent promptitude, we organized a press conference, and you followed it up in the court, and Haja Fatih was fined. We, apart from the press releases, we also do a lot of back channel moves. One typical example, we met the IGP a few months ago over the Rambo-style arrest of journalists in the line of duty. And he did assure us that the police will abandon that side and then pass invitations to offend journalists or alleged offenders through the GJA or their heads. This is a way forward. And I believe by pushing together, it is hard that we don't pull in one direction. Example, when Latif Idrisu of Joe FM was brutalized at the citadel of security at police headquarters, the GJA held a press conference and declared a boycott of the police. And I say with all sadness that Joe FM defied that boycott and attended a program called by the police. Another example, two journalists were molested, brutalized in the full glare of the public at the Independence Square. Again, as part of our back channel moves, we had a meeting with the military hierarchy, the CDS. And for the first time, the military apologized and even asked the victims to suggest any compensation they feel would be satisfactory. Their cameras were replaced and they were paid compensation. This has not been put in the public domain. So we are overly concerned over such attacks and will not flinch from doing the needful to address such attacks. And by way of solution, we believe that we need to organize, we need to educate sensitized journalists on their own safety. And in that direction, we've received assistance from the Norwegian Journalists Union, with which we have organized not less than 10 training programs for journalists to get them to internalize their own safety guidelines so that they reflect them in anything journalistic they do. There are a lot of things we have done in defense of journalists. And I believe Samson, you can testify. Another example, when the modern Ghanaian journalists were arrested, we quickly placed a call to the National Security Minister. He gave us a background. We had a press conference, and Samson, you gave the green light. You were standing by. We were instrumental in getting the 2 journalists released, and the case has died now. Back to the report. We are inclined to believe that it does not obituarize press freedom in Ghana. It does not sound a death knell of free speech in this country. But it serves as a wake-up call for all of us to act to ensure that we bounce back. We can summon the weight of history to look at what happened in 2005 when we were languishing at the 66th position. In 2018, there was a vertiginous rise from to 23rd in the whole world and first in Africa. So the report does not sentence Ghana to any irreversible position. We can bounce back. But it calls for collective action. And one of the actions, as outlined in the response by the Formation Minister, is education of state and non-state actors. Some of the actions, are rooted in ignorance about the work of journalists, what we stand for. Journalists or journalism is the safeguard of freedom. We are the guardrails of democracy. So when you attack a single journalist, you do not only attack all journalists, you attack the very soul of this nation, which is democracy. So in many instances, our soul has been bleeding profusely from such attacks. But it's not enough to bemoan such attacks. We need to move forward to stanch the blood flow by coming together to work in concert to address some of these challenges, no matter how cathedral they are.
Do you share the view that the embarrassment the country has suffered in this report is blamable squarely on government, as in the NPP government regime?
The report does not suggest that the government should take all the blame for what is so embarrassing, depressing. In fact, the government is prominent on the guilty list. There's no two ways about that. The government is prominent on the guilty list because of the actions and inactions by state and non-state actors. For instance, national security operatives, they work directly under the minister who is an official of the government. So they should take the blame. But when it comes to the issue of poor remuneration, and we have a media space which is littered by private institutions, and many of them pay their work at slave wages, and this is not the doing of the government. So it will not be fair to blame the government for this situation. And there's a direct relationship between conditions of service and journalistic output. So if many of our people are so compromised, it's because they are not paid well. And in some worst case scenarios, journalists are not paid at all. And as the saying goes, they must survive. And the survival instincts pushes some of them to criminal heights. And this is something we need to look at.
Tell me how you feel to hear almost all the journalists who have spoken this morning on this show express a certain amount of fear just for doing their work and translating into self-censorship, which the report complains of.
Self-censorship is an insidious enemy of press freedom, and we need to look at. We've come a long way from yesteryears when we were shackled by all kinds of laws, when we were enveloped in the so-called culture of silence. And when I used to work at GBC, it was even an offense to play gospel music. We used a story under J.J. Rollins, and that story was as harmless as ever, that Kenya was going to the polls. J.J. Rollins himself called into the newsroom. And his first option, do you know I can sack? As I said, for what offense? For using a story. Is urging me to also put elections and hand over. So we've come a long way from those yesteryears, from those hellish period. In fact, we cannot compare journalism practice under J.J. Rollins on those hellish period to what is happening now, even though we have challenges.
In the statement issued by
the two are not.
In the statement issued by the information minister, it is measured and it is accepting of some of the things and then assures of what ought to be done. But it speaks about work that has been ongoing, and among them, a certain, structure for the safety of journalists that it speaks about. I am surprised to read about that because the GJA was asked to nominate someone to be on that committee. The GJA sent its letter to me as the one appointed or nominated to represent journalists on the committee. It never called any meeting until we went to elections. As I sit here, I have never been called for anything for that committee. And yet, it is being touted as an institution or a structure that has been set up by government to improve the circumstance.
Again, Samson, we have a collective responsibility to ensure that such structures work. And to me, the report underlines the need for us to amplify our critical voices, to strengthen our independent streak, to solidify our objective bent, to unravel, to expose dark spots, interrogate more than ever before, to hold to account people in positions of power and authority. These are the basic obligations of journalism from which we should not flinch.
All right. Before the elections, I had actually asked Pius Enam Hajide, who was supposed to mobilize the people who have been listed as members of the entity there, and he assured me that, they'll be calling a meeting. It never happened. And then we went for elections. We have returned. We are in May, and we are here listing it as one of the means that government has used to deepen and improve the circumstance. Meanwhile, as far as we are concerned, zero work has happened in this regard. Now, let me now come to all of you, ladies and gentlemen, and to get you to begin to share with us what you think is the way forward. And please try and be as brief as you can and straightforward as you can, so that we can, as it were, utilize the time that is left. On the question that was asked of the GJA as to its elections, somehow I happen to be their lawyer, and they had sought to organize elections in 2021. Unfortunately, one member of the GJA took them to court for the delayed process. They had suggested that, you know, COVID and the rest of them had an impact. And they had issued letters earlier to begin the process. But some of the members also had issues with the list of people qualified to be on the voters list. All of those things culminated eventually to a suit. We went to court to defend the GJA and got the court to make an order for a settlement. By the terms of the settlement, the election should have happened in July, latest in August of 2021. Then today, there's this problem here, the voters list, we can't agree. That is all that has led us to this point. So sometimes I believe that it is unfair to take on Arthur Money as the one who has an interest and therefore entrenching himself over the period. That's all I can say for now. Now, Manasseh, we've gone round, come back to you. Briefly, what can you say is how we should look at this report and what we should be doing?
Briefly, I think three things. First, the leadership of our country should sit up and act. If this report had put Ghana number one, the president and the government would have taken the glory. So they should take the blame and begin to act, especially the president's body language. There are some people in government who are still very friendly. And I have said before that, for instance, I almost always agree with Gabi Ocheredako since the NPP came to power, but I can never say he's intolerant because he will engage you in debate, but he'll do it in a very civil manner. So that is what we expect the government to do. Secondly, the general public, especially the security agencies, should be educated. Sometimes you are prevented from doing your work for no reason. I wanted to take a photograph at Aflao border. Welcome to Ghana. And a soldier confronted me and said this was the security zone. There was no way I could take a picture there. And I don't know what is security about it. Finally, I would want us journalists to also be responsible and use the media responsibly. One of the means to undermine media freedom, even if the government or state actors don't act, is the irresponsible use of the media. Let us use the media, the voices, the platforms we have to unearth the rot and ensure that the right thing is done. And when somebody does something worthy of praise, I don't think there's nothing wrong with extolling their virtues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manasseh. And Evans, in the same order. Yes, Evans. And we know that you had to be going for a function and we held you. We are sorry. Okay, so let me proceed and go to Sawami here. Hello, Sawa. Okay. While she tries to adjust herself, Ifya Pukwa.
Well, something I will comment on a number of issues. Number one, I think that we need a workable professional regulation or policy going forward. And this policy, I think, and I am emphasizing on the word workable, not just theoretical, not just words, not English as we've done in the past, but workable. I think that workable policy or document should speak to media ownership. We should desist from selling frequencies, the National Communication Authority selling frequencies to party officials, members of parliament, party agents who have transmogrified themselves into media owners. This is one of the key issues that is contributing to the self-censorship.
There's supposed to be a broadcasting. There's supposed to be a broadcasting bill. If it were passed into law, then politically exposed persons will not be able to require a license. Once that is not done, and I doubt it will ever be done, you cannot preclude people in politics from, participating in the space.
But that's the danger that we'll continue to face if we cannot preclude. Now, like you said, we doubt if the broadcasting bill will be passed. And if ever it is passed, what happens to those who have already acquired these frequencies and are abusing these frequencies and abusing the workers there? This is a conversation we've had in the past. It is still going on. They are still acquiring the frequencies and polluting the environment. And so when we capture the media environment, we capture all these actors. And yet we know the genesis of these people, that these people are not media people. They are not trained media people. They are not people who have worked in the media. They are just political apparatchiks who just want the media platform to pursue their agenda, including one of the things we have emphasized the point here today. It's about controlling the narrative and controlling the minds of ordinary people. One of the things that they are doing, which I'm talking about this policy that it will address, is awareness. President Afemoni spoke about it. Politicians have succeeded in abusing the minds of ordinary people against media people who are fighting for them. So now messengers of the information are the subject of attack instead of the politicians who are the holders of the public purse and who provide no transparency, no accountability. Now on a daily basis, politicians attack media people and they send their trolls. Sewa and Evans have emphasized that point. So this document, which I'm emphasizing the word workable, will deal with it, including these institutions and setup that these politicians have done. Both NDC and MPP have it. What they have is these people who manage the social media landscape. So now, what Afemoni spoke about, Chairman Rollins calling the newsroom, is no longer the modus operandi. The modus operandi is coming at you in social media, denigrating you, attacking you, to the point of I know media people who are now exhibiting signs of depression, who have been diagnosed with depression. So this is a serious issue that we're dealing with. Also, Samson, permit me to speak about the economic issue. We cannot go forward without dealing with the economic issues. Journalists are not paid well. They are not paid well because the institutions that run them are owned by politicians who have no business in paying journalists well. And that's why I think Afemoni and GJ comes in. I think that when we have this workable document, we will insist that no journalist should be paid.
You are paid well. You are paid according to your value. Let everybody work, get their due wages.
But something, nobody should be paid below minimum wage. That's what I'm talking about. It's not about, I probably am being paid because of the years I've worked.
Thank you. And what you bring to the table.
But below minimum wage, even under Ghana labor law.
Thank you very much, Efia Pokua. Evans, can we hear you quickly? Hello, Evans has a little problem. Hello, Sawame here. Okay, let's go to Nanaya Mensah.
Hello. Yes, sorry, is that Evans going ahead?
Yes, Nanaya, go ahead.
Okay, I'd agree pretty much with what everybody else is saying. In the same way as one should rightly hold the government to account, and one hopes that, if you like, a more vigorous pursuit of the broadcasting bill and trying to see some form of it passed. I don't know that I'd agree outright with the idea that political actors should have no right to own media. Across the world, there are political actors who own media. But I think, say, other interests should be encouraged to go into media ownership and professionalize the media. We have to kind of hold the light up to ourselves and also scrutinize ourselves. There are large parts of the media that fail to meet any kind of acceptable standards of professionalism.
I agree with you on that note too.
Held to account often enough for their lack of standards. Obviously, I wouldn't be talking about multimedia there. And encourage balance. We should also try very hard not to be both judge and jury in our own case. So in this exceptional circumstance, we're talking about abuses of journalists and poor conditions of work and so on. And we're in the exceptional position of having the tools at our disposal to hit back at the public or the government or the state or whoever we think it is that is the source of our problem, and therefore present a very one-sided view of things. So I think we have to live up to our own standards. If people are feeling threatened and, for example, have to go as far as leaving the country in order to ensure their own personal safety, they should also acknowledge when they are able to return in the same environment, presumably under conditions of safety, and continue to work and live normally in this country.
All right.
Perhaps not just necessarily ascribe it to political factors. And then I'd say the concluding part of the Minister of Information's statement about ongoing dialogue between the government and journalists should be welcomed, and he should be pushed to hold true to his promises.
That's
I
right.
think this is a case of journalists just want to be loved. A lot of us are very insecure creatures. I won't say that this is true about myself or not, but we want to feel appreciated for the job of work that we do, for holding up the public interest, defending the public interest,
Right.
and feel when we speak truth to power, power listens. And that's just to do with more open dialogue and
Right.
more of a sense of openness on both sides.
Thank you so very much. So I'm here, or Evans. Let's hear Evans first.
Yes, I'm saying, I think we've talked a lot about the GJA, but also the National Media Commission. I think the National Media Commission should be more assertive. It should rediscover its voice, especially when it comes to the circumstances in which the journalists work, the concerns about safety, the self-censorship issues, the economic issues. I think we shouldn't leave this to the GJA to lead. I mean, GJA is an association. The NMC is a constitutional body. And I think they should lead the conversation on how to deal with this. Of course, the Information Ministry in the statement says they want to work, enhance their collaboration with the NMC. I think we should move beyond the rhetoric and get the NMC pulling everybody else to the table to address the fundamental issues that have led to this very poor ranking.
Thank you, Evans. You repeated NMC. Manasseh started on the note that there are trust issues with the NMC because of the historic situation where it is a government, sponsored person who is the head of the institution. But there are technocrats there as well. Let's hear from Liz Hefronasari. Please unmute.
Sorry. I heard you when you spoke about money and where the stance is with GJA and the elections, but it has been 2 years. And for me, it is worrying that he's still carrying himself out as the GJA president. If I was him, I wouldn't do so, because even if the thing is in court, still, his mandate is over, and it was over 2 years ago. And charity begins at home. If we as journalists cannot have a house in order, how do we expect anybody to want to look at us and help us? So we need to start at home. Again, if I was working in somebody's chambers for 20, 30 years, it won't make me a lawyer because I've been in the chambers that long. If I was working in a hospital, as an orderly for that length of time, it doesn't make me a nurse, it doesn't make me a doctor.
That's right.
So we need to look at that seriously. We need to define who a journalist is. If we do so and we raise our value, we won't be complaining about poor remuneration, because people who set up organizations would know that they have to go for qualified people, and the qualified people have a value on them.
All right.
And then you will get people respecting journalists and behaving towards them in a way that we all expect. Until we do so, we have a long way to go to clean up the mess that is.
Thank you very much. We have 2 minutes left. Let's see how you can deal with a minute each. Okoteche Free Farmers, let's hear you. Please unmute.
Okay, Samson, very simple. I think until the hypocrisy in our media landscape comes to a halt, we will continue to face these kind of things. When I talk about the hypocrisy, it's about certain classism within the media space, where when certain things happen to a certain group of people, we don't give it the same mileage as when it happens to those we believe to be more journalists than others. Again, I think that we must all come together with one voice to speak for those who are underpaid in our media landscape. Because if a journalist is not paid well, it is a threat to himself and a threat to the profession.
Thank you very much.
In the ending, I think that Afro Money and his executives, they've done more harm than good to the face of journalism in this country. And if possible, all of them should step aside for us to have a new leadership that will rebrand JJ.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's hear Mr. Arthur Money. There's supposed to be elections July, is it 24?
24th July, the elections will be held, and I know journalists are addicted to voting wisely. So they would like wise officers to take over the GJ, despite the attacks, orchestrated attacks from Lisa Okuteche. And let me borrow a Malian proverb says, no one figure can wash the face. Contextually, no one institution can address the issues outlined in the reports, no matter how damning by that borders. And we need to orchestrate a national conversation on some of the solutions, like salary of poor salaries of journalists, and of course the ownership structure in the media.
I'm very sorry, but this is where we end it. I'm very sorry about that. My outfit is by Habil's Couture. You can call them 0200 84 1988, and my guests have been Okatiche Afrifa Mensah, who is media practitioner and chief, Sewa Ame here, broadcast journalist, GHTV. Arthur Money is with the GJA. Let's hear from Asari is journalist, media consultant. Efia Pukua is broadcast journalist and programs director at the Despite Media Group. Nanaya Mensah is supervising editor at Asasi Radio. Manasi Azuri Awune is editor-in-chief, The Fourth Estate. And Evans Mensah is head political desk, Joy News and Joy FM. I'm Samson Lardy Anyenini. Afternoon. See you next week, God willing.